Should men get in touch with their feminine side in an era of gender confusion and psychological castration? Our collective mental health has never been worse, and we are desperately searching and clutching and reaching for true and inspiring narratives about the living essence of manhood and womanhood. We need stories and examples that we can relate to, and stories which we can use as a foundation for our own adult identity project. A ground for us to grow our consciousness, and it seems like there are way too many options, so it brings us back to the question of should men get in touch with their inner feminine? The ultimate answer is yes, but this video is going to be a nuanced exploration to break down this dichotomy, duality between man and woman, while paradoxically also respecting the unique and distinct psychological differences and preferences of masculinity and femininity. I've got a stack, well actually 2 stacks of reading material, which I'm going to be bringing in throughout this video, but I fundamentally want this to be a practical exploration to this question. It's going to be a 2-part video series. This one's targeted towards men, the other video targeted towards women, on the concept of the anima and the animus, which is Carl Jung's essential exploration and theoretical compartmentalization of the divine masculine and the divine feminine as they appear within individual men and individual women. The anima, in a few sentences, is the archetype of the eternal, idealized woman. In her many faces and her many forms, she is the encapsulating circle which contains the good girl daughter, the rebellious brat, the mother, the queen, the crone, the huntress. Every single feminine archetype is contained and reflected and networked within this idea of the anima. If this is one of your first videos on Jungian theory, we can strip it all the way back to this is a man's understanding of women in the world. Small women, adult women, and old women, good women, bad women, the many shades of women that they fall in love with and want nothing more than to never speak to again. This is love and hatred. This is projection, identification, idealization, demonization. It all clusters around the psychology of the anima. If you've ever been someone who falls in love very quickly, it's likely that you've got a bit of a anima possession, or if you're a woman, it's an animus possession. I'm going to keep this video targeted towards men in particular. The other video, which I've linked up in the screen, is for the feminine equivalent, integrating the inner masculine, but definitely watch both of them because the aim of the game is psycho-education. If you want to learn how to integrate your anima, you're going to need to understand the psychology of women to become a better man, which sounds peculiar. Didn't I just say that men should be men and women should be women? That's essentially what I said. I said it in a more conscious, expansive manner with the living essence of manhood and womanhood. But simple language is, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Are there such things as gender roles? And are there distinct biological preferences and even hardwiring which would indicate a certain type of character which is distinctly male and distinctly female? Well, we don't need to look too far into the modern dating space to realize just how hostile things can get and how confusing and painful the relationship between men and women can start to become. If we don't understand ourselves and don't understand each other, the number one way to integrate your anima is education. It's to read books like this one, an essay collection about feminine consciousness, to be a woman, to read archetypal books like Goddesses in Every Woman, or even to go and read books targeted towards conscious mothers like Raising Our Children, Raising Ourselves. Why have I got this in my library as a young man who doesn't have children? It's because I want to understand what it means to be a mother. I want to understand what the mother identity, the mother experience, the mother archetype is, in the same way that I also have books that are leaning more towards the erotic. Here we have Tao Tantric Arts for Women. We have this book, which I'm not going to say out loud because of YouTube robot. And we also have an understanding, of course, that if we don't understand the eroticized feminine, we are going to be caught in this kind of trap, which many men are caught in, and some would say, I would say, let's be honest, I would say that any kind of fixation on either the Playboy lifestyle, be it a digital version of the Playboy lifestyle where you're going onto waste of time websites on a daily basis and chasing the many different forms of the feminine that titillate your senses, you are caught in an anima possession. If you're going out to the club every weekend looking for a new face and a new figure to get your fill, what are you chasing? Are you chasing sensation? Or if you really peel it back and look deeper inside yourself, maybe you're chasing contact with the feminine that you have so thoroughly compartmentalized and disowned that you can only access that feeling of sensitivity and joy and delightfulness. This is the businessman example, right? Very cliche. The businessman who is 9 to 5 or maybe 8 till 8, 5 days a week. He goes out on the Friday night, and because he has been rigid and stoic and put together and focused on the money and focused on the company and focused on the rank and the reputation and the hierarchy and the status, he can only access his feminine through the girl who is 10 years younger than him, who's kind of tipsy and kind of sloppy and a bit like, because that is so dysfunctionally complementary. He is so dysfunctionally rigid that he needs a much younger girl who is in a chaotic state, especially in these nightclub environments, who can give him some kind of contact with the emotionality that he has buried within himself and thrown all the way out into the world. It's the same pattern in a less extreme form if you're hooked on adult material. Going onto those websites, I have been on this journey for many years. It's taken me years to stop doing those kinds of things. It's been over 3 years now, not going on those websites, changing the way that I use my energy. And if you start to peel back and realize that opening up 10 different tabs for 10 different women, maybe there's a common thread towards something that I'm searching for. Maybe it's the feminine gaze. It's a very explicit conversation. If you really look into male psychology, what's happening with anima possession, mostly men will be interested in the feminine face. We think that we're interested in certain body parts, one form or another, that gets our attention, but primarily what men are interested in, if you read books like this one, they're interested in the look. They're interested in that wide-eyed, here's a woman who sees me, and all of that fascination and excitement and the feelings of power, the feelings of control, the feelings of status that a woman would allow you access to her intimate space in that way. It means that you're someone worth loving. It means that you're someone who is someone to be able to get this quality of woman. That's the game that many men get caught up in, and if they can't do it in real life, they'll substitute in fantasy, usually with a screen and a variety of strangers who have lives that I wouldn't want my daughter to go through. So why are we hooked on them? How is it this strong? Well, we don't understand the role of the invisible partner. This is one of the key books for this video by John Sanford. It's a Jungian exploration of the inner masculine and the inner feminine within relational dynamics and within obsession in particular. If you're a man who's hooked on the anima, which means you're hooked on the archetypal feminine, you have a fixation and a fascination for giving disproportionate amounts of your time towards the pursuit of women, either in the form of baseline level gratification or maybe being inspired, being like a romantic poet from the 18th century who would write a sonnet to the fair maiden who caught your eye and would love nothing more than to be the chivalrous gentleman that woos her around the perimeter of the country grounds. Any archetypal version of the story, be it the gangster who takes what he wants, be it the barbarian who goes into the village and ravishes the woman over his shoulder, all versions of that story speak to the acquisition of femininity, right? You're acquiring contact with the feminine, externalized as this particular woman or that particular woman, but if you really strip it back, you're searching for the feminine. So why not take that search deeper within you and see what the feminine means for you? I did a recent video a few months ago on this idea of assertiveness and receptivity, with the masculine principle generally being assertive and the feminine principle generally being receptive. And I started to play around with the dualities because, of course, men are not just assertive beings. I spoke to this idea of being a man who's in love with nature. If you go for a walk in nature, especially if you're barefoot, especially if you're shirtless, especially if it's a beautiful day, and you're in touch with your heart, you're in touch with your soul, you won't feel like you're asserting into nature. You'll feel like you're receiving. You'll feel like the sun is being absorbed into your skin. You'll feel like the ground is being absorbed through your feet. And you'll feel your heart start to warm when you see birds in the trees and squirrels looking for nuts on the floor. You will receive nature. And nature, classically speaking, is assigned to the feminine. I have issue with that classification by itself. I think that there are many elements of masculinity and femininity in any natural form. The wind is not merely feminine, the earth is not merely masculine or feminine, fire is not masculine or feminine. If you go deeper, it gets more nuanced. To keep it simple for the sake of the teaching moment right here, the masculine who is always assertive, always the phallic principle of dominance, control, direction, ambition, work ethic, these classic associations, something like the king warrior, magician, lover, archetypal, quaternity, breakdown. Very useful, but also quite limiting at a different stage of identity. What we need to do as men, to the best of my knowledge, having worked with men in psychological space, having gone through my own psychological journey, is understanding the seasonality and the appropriate action based on the appropriate season of our lives. If you are a young man who hasn't figured out your finances, hasn't figured out your health, your fitness, the general things that you see in male self-development YouTube, maybe it's not the time to be putting disproportionate emphasis on your ability to receive nature in a truly inner feminine, inner anima way. However, you may also say, well, if I can do a bit of that, if I can get more in touch with my heart, if I can understand that the fact that I haven't cried for 5 years and I have that issue with my father from before and that betrayal from my male friend from a few years ago, and start to feel the sadness of that and let the tears wash away the holding pattern of some outdated masculine archetype of stoicism, you can start to walk the fine line between a healthy man who's on a masculine path, a clearly masculine path, but has that 10%, that 15%, maybe 30% complementary feminine quality to his very distinctly masculine presence. If you watched a few of my videos, you'd probably say, and probably agree with the fact that I lean more towards the masculine. I've read hundreds of books. I mean, in the last 4 years, it's going towards 600 books. I'm categorizing them, I'm organizing them, I'm doing a structured series. Even the brackets that I choose to have in the numbering of these titles, you gotta go for the square bracket. You need that square, hard line bracketing and containing, and I don't want the softness, I want that rigid line, that structure, that wall which we can bounce against and walk within, that lane which is known and leads us through in the chaos. That's what ignites me at my core. I'm also rather feminine in certain moments. I can have even a motherly quality. I can get soft, I can get compassionate, I can be very nurturing, and I can be very intimate with a client when it's something that requires zero structure. It's just feeling, it's just presence. But we have to also break down those qualities as soon as I say them. It's so artificially limiting to imagine that I am this type of masculine man and these are my feminine qualities, because if you go deeper into the journey, you realize that a good father is also quite like a good mother in certain ways, even though at a certain stage beforehand, a father is very different from a mother. A certain moment where the father comes back and provides some kind of structure or some kind of standard, some form of conditional, healthy, masculine goal-setting energy, and the mother is more unconditionally regarding or unconditionally positively regarding to the daughter or the son. They complement each other, but their roles can swap. The mother can then say this standard isn't good enough and the grades really needed to be higher so that we could go on this trip, and that's healthy parenting, healthy consequence. And the father may swap into the role of the healthy mother when it's bedtime and the son or daughter is crying, and he takes them into his chest and soothes them like a mother. He's not bringing out his breast for breastfeeding, but he's doing something deeply tender in that moment. Men can be that, in the same way that women can be organized and structured and disciplined. And the distinction, of course, is preference. The distinction is preference and the seasonal importance of what's happening on a daily basis and where is your natural proclivity as a man or a woman. There are different biological realities. For the anima in particular, the key integration pattern is realizing that as a man, you have a wide variety of impressions of the outside world. See if there's any books here that I didn't hold up. Ah, yes, this is a good one. Didn't bring up Projection and Recollection. Read a book like this, Projection and Recollection in Jungian Psychology by Marie-Louise von Franz. This goes into the real academic psychological space of what's happening when we do project and disown our internal aspects which feel uncomfortable. A man who is not comfortable with being delightful, carefree, jovial, kind of clumsy, maybe a bit naive, maybe a bit innocent. If he's really, truly uncomfortable with that part inside of himself, he's also more likely to be attracted to the woman that has more of a stereotypical good girl, small kind of energy. If the man is particularly disorganized in his own identity and he's kind of comfortable being more fluid and going with the flow and very intuitive, he's likely to then attract more of a authoritarian, mother-like partner because he's looking for the complements of that which he doesn't have within. I could give a dozen different examples, and I'm not even saying them with complete precision. The principle that I want to be conveyed is that the holes within us get filled by the projections we place out there, and sometimes, if we're on the mark, we'll find someone who actually matches the projection, and we play it out in romance, we play it out in friendship, or we play it out in fantasy, but you don't need to be locked into that endless cycle of projecting onto women, projecting in fantasy, and seeing that your femininity could only ever be out there and not realizing how much you have access to. One of the key parts of my healing journey, in terms of actually opening up my body, and some men, they'd be uncomfortable, even just the idea of moving like this, or going slow, and they'd have associations that this means something that it doesn't. I used to be particularly vulnerable in my late teens, early 20s, in terms of fantasy at the very least, and sometimes in actuality, to the very gymnastic, dancer kind of woman, the woman who was really in her body. Of course, it's because I was dissociative and deeply depressed, and my body was limited to gym movements. I didn't have the understanding or the access to flow and to do this. I'm doing this publicly now on camera. It's just here. It's okay. It's not where I live. I live with my 2 feet on the ground, but I have the ability to flow. Until I realized that I didn't need to date or fantasize about the dancer who would fulfill my unresolved feminine longing, and I could actually learn how to dance as a man, learn how to be connected to nature, and learn how to be more intuitive in my own movements. Proportionally, not all the time, a couple times a week, organized, structured. I'm not going to dissolve into chaos. I'm not going to be lost in gender confusion. I'm a man who can have complementary polarity and know when to do that as a way of individuating. That's where the word actually comes in handy. Carl Jung's idea of individuation, the pursuit of wholeness, requires the withdrawal of energy from the reality out there and realizing how much you have inside of you. But as a final point for the video, there is a limit. There's a limit to how much we can become whole without relationship to other people. If you look at things like attachment theory and this idea of anxious attachment, secure attachment, avoidant attachment, disorganized attachment, the underlying essence is that we become attached. Human beings need to relate to other human beings, otherwise they become mentally unwell. They become deeply depressed, deeply anxious, deeply paranoid or withdrawn. We need healthy relationships, romantic, friendship, family, professional, and even casual relationships with the cashier down the road and the postman who delivers your package. We need these relationships to understand who we are in the context of the other person. It's almost as if we form a world of mirrors which reflect back the identities which are presented to us, and we create these moments of exchange which build the identity as the fluid process that we are. We always grow with other people who show us what we are and what we are not. Of course, they project and we project, and there's a whole distorted circus fun house field of mirrors where you get really bloated and really thin, or they see you as a demonic figure that towers above them, or an angel that's come to save them. All of that's the beauty and the mess of the human game. Fundamentally, however, I think it's a bit of a, how would I say this? It's not true. It's not a true narrative that you'll ever be able to be completely whole, completely individuated, completely integrated as one individual human being, which is why we have such a fascination on bedroom intimacy. It's why the majority of healthy men and women will want to have a child in their life. They'll want to come together with their complementary partner and create something that could only be created as a man engaging with a woman, or a woman allowing a man to be inside of her. It's deeply biological, but the psychological element of the biological reality is that we can never be fully complete. We are two halves of a jigsaw puzzle. The bedroom encounter is the most extreme. Creating children together is the foundational essence of what it means to be relating to each other. But even in platonic relationships and romantic situations outside of the bedroom, we still need each other. We need to understand what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, and have enough men and enough women who are comfortable accepting the wonderful benefits and very likely, very stereotyped, but very general drawbacks of being either gender. We need to know what that means so that we can live in harmony and work together. And I don't believe that we're helped out by dissolving all the boundaries and dissolving all the categorizations, rather than doing a deep effort through books like these to go into challenging psychological space and do real adult thinking based on genuine, practical pattern awareness of what men are generally like, what women are generally like, and from that place of solid footing, we can begin to develop at higher levels where we start to play between the boundaries, but let's not disregard that foundational, healthy duality before we start to blur the lines, because we'll be building on stilts and the scaffolding will not be there. A long conversational video on anima psychology. If you enjoyed this video, please click over right onto the next video where we're talking about the animus. Everyone, men and women, will benefit from both these videos. That's the one over there. And we're going to be flipping this all on its head, and hopefully it'll merge into wholeness. I'll see you over there.